I'm sorry, but this is going to have to be in English, and I don't know how long my voice will last. I've had really bad flu the last 4 days, so please excuse me if I choke and splutter through this. This is an interesting title. The thought that anyone thinks that quotas are a violation of human rights is, I thought, something that belonged 30 years ago, not now. That people are even discussing this issue shows that there's a continuing resistance, particularly males, to giving up power. They just don't want to do it. It's a power issue, not a rights issue. International human rights conventions clearly contemplate that affirmative actions such as quotas are allowable, as long as they're proportionate. It's made quite clear in things like CEDAW, Article 4.1 in the European Convention on Human Rights, Protocol 12, the preamble to that, and well, recent anyway, European Court jurisprudence on this issue. Whether they're an ultimate expression of human values, to me, is a bit too absolutist. I mean, an ultimate expression, I don't know. There's certainly, though, a necessary and proportionate response to refusals to share power in a gender equitable way. Necessary and proportionate. When we look at the frameworks, I mean, they're normative frameworks. They're agreed international instruments. They're not something handed down from on high. And people have agreed internationally that, for example, in CEDAW 4, that accelerating de facto equality between men and women shall not be considered discrimination. European Convention on Human Rights, Protocol 12, reaffirming that the principle of non-discrimination does not prevent states parties from taking measures in order to promote full and effective equality, provided that there is an objective and reasonable justification. And that justification has been held by the European Court of Justice, or the Court of Justice of the European Union, that preferring women over men because of their gender is likely to be lawful where women are underrepresented in the particular field or otherwise disadvantaged, and that preference is proportionate. Proportionate is the key word. As long as you don't eliminate another party, as long as everyone still has the opportunity to participate, the court has held that this action is in fact proportionate. The other issue that the court has held in interpreting this protocol is that there has to be some consideration of respective merits. So, for example, with candidacy, everyone has to be eligible to be a candidate. You can't take women as candidates if they're not eligible to be a candidate. There's nothing to stop you having, under human rights legislation and human rights framework in Europe, a quota for women as candidates. Talking about electoral systems is a little bit more difficult in this country, just diverting that from it, because of the use of the open list system. And people like the EU in the past have questioned the use of genders with open lists. They see that it somehow affects the imposition of the will of the people. It depends which part of the will of the people you're trying to impose. The will of the people that allows you to choose the particular candidate you like, or the will of the people that gives always the votes to the highest candidate. Under a closed list proportional representation system, it's easy to have quotas. Open list, more difficult. But it's the same situation with open list, with minority representation, no one worries about that. With the threshold, no one worries about that. It's solely aimed at women and women's representation. People from minority parties get fewer votes than people from minority parties and still get elected. People from parties like AKR got huge numbers of votes, many more than candidates from other parties that did not get elected in the last election. So this is a strange argument to me. There are 3 levels of quotas that you can have: constitutional, legal, voluntary. To me, voluntary quotas are always best because they give a commitment, to show the commitment of the organisation to do something about it. But if you can't get that, legal or constitutional quotas help you to get along that way. And there's quotas worldwide in a number of countries, not just for elective representation, but for cabinet positions, as in Rwanda. In the bureaucracy, in a number of countries, including in parts of the bureaucracy in Albania, in Armenia, Bangladesh, Bosnia, Croatia, Ecuador, some German states, Uganda. Many countries have quotas in the bureaucracy. What's coming to the fore now is quotas in corporate boards. in some of the most progressive democracies in the country. Sorry, in the world, not in the country. Belgium, Germany, Italy, Malaysia, Netherlands, Norway, Spain, all have quotas now for corporate boards. I want to come back to that in a little while because it says something about this decision of the Kosovo Constitutional Court that I think shows they totally missed the point. Voluntary, most normally in political parties and in government executives and bureaucracies. There are over 20 countries that have voluntary quotas in government executives and bureaucracies. 37 countries have got, mainly starting from Scandinavia, have got voluntary quotas for candidacy in political parties. And what's interesting is when you look at the corporate sector, most of the countries with the highest proportions of women in management, not on boards, have got basically voluntary quotas. The BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China. Do they make a difference? Well, there's been little research, unfortunately, on what difference quotas make. There has been some in India, where they have quotas for the election of village chief or village head, village council heads, where a third of them have to be women. It's very complex there because they have single-member district system, which means it's a more difficult thing to impose a quota on. There has been research after the 1998 and 2003 elections that showed that there was a large increase in the perceptions of women being effective as leaders, but only after the second time of having a woman as leader of the village council. So a fairly large-scale survey on this. And it also found that these quotas, after they've been introduced, raise parental aspirations for daughters and the aspirations of women for themselves. So yeah, they have an impact. If women don't get the chance to lead, no one knows how well they can lead. Corporate sector is interesting to look at. Again in this, Norway, leader in gender equity. Since 2003 they've had a 40% quota on corporate boards in Norway. Overall, they've got 37% in reality because of some quirks in the way the system works. However, when you look at the part of corporate life that doesn't have a quota, senior management, similar women, similar qualifications needed, only 22% of senior managers are women. So the quota again makes a difference. Not that they're the only issue. The gender-friendly environment is essential. It's fine to have a quota, but if then you provide a work situation where it's impossible for women to work effectively, it doesn't really work that well. So the two things have got to go hand in hand. Quotas necessary, but not the only thing that has to be looked at. Just finally, Credit Suisse, the big corporate bank from Switzerland that provides tax havens for the world's great and good, does a survey of women in the corporate sector every 2 years. And the last survey last year came up with one really interesting conclusion. Gender diverse leadership performs better. Not just this, it's to do with rights, but it actually performs better. They looked at a worldwide comparison of companies with a market capitalisation of over $10 billion, the biggest companies in the world. And they looked at the share performance of these companies. And the shares of those with gender diverse boards over the last 6 years performed 26% better than those with male dominated boards. So why wouldn't you have women in these positions? If you don't have them, why wouldn't you have a quota to make sure that they actually get there? They found that gender diverse boards analyse risk in more depth. They question strategic decisions more validly. And they're not shy to rein in CEOs who go on the rampage. I was also part of this survey. They interviewed male directors and they found 72% of them not heard of the fact there'd been research on gender diverse boards or gender diverse management. And those who had dismissed it as being irrelevant, didn't want to know the evidence. And while no such research has been done on male politicians, we could reasonably expect that you get similar results by talking to them. So in relation to recent events in Kosovo with the Constitutional Court, we can infer that the gender diverse executive cabinet would similarly be better for a country's development than a predominantly male one. So what is the Constitutional Court doing to the development of this country?
We are wondering that too, but we have a member of the former